Parenting is so very rewarding, but it also has times when challenges pop up, especially when your child is testing boundaries with you. Master Mom Amanda Olson joins us this morning to share some tips on what to do when your child looks at you and says, "You can't make me." My wife says that to me too.
Well, that's okay.
That's a whole different situation.
I don't work on that topic.
Yeah, but it happens.
Yeah. They you know, a lot of times it's just them kind of testing the waters to see what can I get away with, and we want to make sure that they know they can't get away with, you know, speaking to you with that kind of disrespect and disobedience.
Right, like I said, testing boundaries. I mean, children do it in different ways. I mean, different children do it different ways. And you have to set those boundaries, don't you? Right.
You know, and one of the advantages that I have from working with children and families for over 35 years is to see what can happen if you have a 4-year-old who's saying something like that to you. What will happen if you don't address that? What happens when they're 9 years old and they're saying that to you, 14 years old? You know, it's not something that they outgrow.
Right.
You know, it's not a phase that they're going through when they speak to you with that kind of disrespect and blatant disobedience.
Right.
You know, and what I see is parents are kind of hoping that that'll just stop. Right. And if you don't nip it in the bud, if you don't take it right then you can run into some real struggles, because when they're 16, maybe you can't make them. You know, they're going to be big and strong-willed, and if you haven't set that precedent of respect your parents, respect authority at a young age, it's not just going to magically happen when they become older.
And I've been there when you're teaching classes, and respect and being respectful, part of that discipline that you all teach there at Olson's.
Right, and one of the things that we really teach the children is, you know, they're usually very respectful to us as the teachers, you know, and parents will tell us all the time, they're great here, they're great at school, but at home, you know, so we try to teach the children that, you know, your parents do so much more for you than we do.
Right.
You know, they deserve a lot more respect, you know, and to, you know, I know we've talked about saying yes sir and yes ma'am. Well, that really just does set that, you know, you want to have fun with your kids, but especially at that young age, you really can't be their friend.
Right.
You have to have a separation of, you know, you're the authority in the relationship, and if they do say something like that to you, there has to be, you know, a consequence. And, you know, I always recommend a timeout, taking away a privilege, assigning a chore, you know, something like that as a consequence for that kind of disrespect.
And I think too, almost, you know, you want to make them have respect for you, but you also, when they do the right things, maybe a little pat on the back as well.
Absolutely, especially if this is an issue you're working on, and they, you know, you've talked about it and you've let them know that this isn't right. You can say, you know, they say something disrespectful, you say, would you like to rethink that?
Right.
Would you like to say something else?
Yes.
You know, and give them a chance to, you know, think about it. A lot of times they'll say, sorry, you know, or if you give them that moment instead of just jumping right to a punishment. You know, especially, like I said, some parents are lucky. They've got these super compliant, nice kids who would never dream of saying that, but some kids like to really push that boundary, you know, so working with them to overcome that tendency and say, you know, you can not want to do something, but you can't be disrespectful about it.
Right. And even with my children, and I'm going to tell on my children right now, there are times when I get the respect or their mother doesn't, or vice versa, and you've got to make sure that both parents are getting the same amount of respect.
Absolutely. You know, back each other up, and, you know, with all the different kinds of families, grandparents, you know, it's important that whatever the rules that are set for the household, all the adults in the picture help support those.
And I have found over the years that making your child say yes ma'am, no sir, those things, that goes a long, long way.
It does, and it goes a long way with them for their future too. It shows respect for all types of authority.
And when they go in for those job interviews and those college interviews, those things that are very, very important in life, and they say those things, that goes a long way.
Yes, it does.
And taking care of their futures. That's the main responsibility as a parent.
We want to raise children who are not only respectful but are respected. You know, and that helps build them up and builds their confidence and helps them be a productive member of society. You know, so if they're showing tendencies against that at 4, 5, 6 years old, you know, help them out by disciplining them.
All right, very good, Amanda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Amanda Olson, she has some great tips. And folks, Olson's Martial Arts, it's just right down the street here at Cherry Street. There's the website. And if you got questions for her, askmastermom.com. She would love to hear from you today on there. And if you got to make a phone call, give them a call today. They'd love to get your student in there and start learning the martial arts.